We're live.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the March 23, 2022 Planning Commission regular video meeting. It is now 6:06 p.m. and the Planning Commission meeting is now in session. I'm Mike Murphy, the Planning Commission Vice Chair, sitting in for Dan Hubble, who is not here tonight. Tonight's virtual Planning Commission meeting is brought to you courtesy of video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video for this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel for your viewing pleasure. Deputy Director Allison Van Gorp and other staff members and other outside parties are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing app. So welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please have your mics turned on whenever Senior Administrative Assistant Lori Carlson conducts a roll call during the meeting. Lori will be conducting roll call votes so we accurately capture each person's vote. So Lori, please call the roll.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not voting. We're just taking attendance. And just say here after I call your name. Commissioner Boatsman.
Present.
Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Goodman is absent. And Chair Hubble is absent. Vice Chair Murphy.
Present.
Commissioner Reeses.
Here.
And Commissioner Accuse.
Here.
Did I say it correctly, Kate?
Thank you.
Okay. For this meeting, we continue to utilize the Zoom platform, and I'll do my best to recognize all of you in order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your questions or make your comments. Before we start with appearances, I want to welcome Kate to the Planning Commission. We're glad to have you on board as we head into what may be a very busy year, although Allison was saying before the meeting started that the agendas coming up are not too heavy. In any event, your environmental and financial expertise and experience at King County will add an important element and perspective to our work. I think your Girl Scout troop leader experience may also come in handy at times with this group. So welcome.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other thoughts to add to that?
Welcome to the team.
It's glad to have you.
Thank you.
So our first item of business is appearances. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the commission on any item. And Lori, is there anyone who signed up for appearances who wish to address the commission?
There are no scheduled appearances tonight.
Okay. So thank you. We move on to our next item of business, regular business. The first item is to review and consider approving the February 16, 2022 minutes. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Victor, you have a comment or are you seconding?
I'm not seconding, just a point of order. If I have a change, do you want to do that before we approve the minutes or where does that fall?
I would think that we get a second for approval and then we discuss any changes. Is that correct, Allison?
Yep, that's correct.
I'll
Great.
second it.
Okay. Victor, you have a point on the minutes?
Yeah. On the public hearing, agenda item number 2, there's a comment from Ms. Tobin. And in the video testimony, she presented herself as trustee and manager of the Olson Family Trust and an owner of the Islandia Business Center. I don't believe she presented herself as a business owner. As an aside, I think that may have led to some confusion on Chair Hubble's testimony to the city council, where he indicated that there were business owners who were providing testimony, and I'm aware of none when looking at the minutes of the meeting.
Okay. So you have a specific change to the language there then?
Sure. Why don't we use her language? That was trustee and manager of the Allison Family Trust and owner of Islandia Center.
Allison,
And strike real estate and business owners on Mercer Island.
Allison, do we need to have a second for that and then a vote?
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
Second for that?
Oh, wait, are you looking for a second for the motion to adopt or a second for his change?
His change. We've
Oh,
all
okay, I'm sorry.
seconded motion.
I'll second the change so we can talk about it.
Victor, anything else to add to what you've said?
Nope, just correcting the record.
Okay. Hearing any other comments from anyone? Hearing no further discussion, do we need a roll call vote for this, Lori?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay,
Yes. So roll call vote to approve the minutes.
now to approve the.
I'm sorry, to approve the,
Amendment.
to approve the change to the minutes.
Correct.
Sorry about that. So Commissioner Boatsman,
Yes,
Commissioner Friedman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Aye.
Commissioner Accuse.
Aye. Do I say aye or yes? Sorry.
Either one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes. For the correction now, do we need I assume we need a vote now to approve the minutes as amended. Got it. Okay, let's do that one more time. Because that motion was made and seconded by Carolyn. So I think that's teed up and ready to go.
Yeah, so let's start from the top again. Commissioner Boatsman,
yes,
Commissioner Friedman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Aye.
Commissioner Accuse.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes and the minutes are approved. We move on to the next regular business item, which is number 2 on the agenda, ZTR 21-007 and ZTR 21-008, the transportation and park impact fee updates. Kendra Breland of Fair and Piers and Jason Hennessy of Burke have presentations or have a presentation. Allison, you want to introduce them?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so just a tiny bit of background on this item. The impact fees were originally adopted back in 2016, and we've been collecting revenue as new development comes in for permits. The impact fees are assessed and collected by the city and then used for parks and transportation projects. I guess back in 2020, the city council directed us to begin looking at updating the fees based on our new updated project lists for capital facilities. And we contracted with Fair and Piers and Burke last year to begin that work. And they're now getting close to being finished with updating the rate studies. And so we wanted to bring to the Planning Commission the code amendment that would be necessary to actually adopt the updated fees. So Kendra and Jason are here tonight, and they've got a brief presentation to walk you through kind of impact fees 101. What are they, and why would we update them, and how do we do that? And then we'll have time after their presentation for questions and discussion. All right, Kendra, I think you're getting us started.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. And I have the presentation. So Jason, even when you're talking, if you want me to just keep driving on my computer, I'm more than happy to do that. So let me share my screen here. Actually, I can just do the presentation. Okay, and let me get this into presentation mode. Everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, I see a thumbs up. So great. Well, thank you very much for having us. Again, my name is Kendra Brayland. I'm a principal with Farron Peers. We're a transportation consulting firm in Seattle. And I'm joined by Jason Hennessy of Burke Consulting, and he'll be representing the parks update. And then of course we have Allison here. So first of all, just quick agenda, just going to go mostly spend our time with just an impact fees overview. City of Mercer Island, of course, has an existing system, as Allison just mentioned. So we'll talk a little bit about a few of the aspects of your current program. And then we'll talk about the impetuses for updating your current program and how we're approaching that. And I'm going to give most of the depth about transportation, and then I'll be passing it off to Jason, who will talk about the parks update. But just quick high-level slide, which applies to both parks and transportation. Just overall, what are impact fees? So they are one-time charges paid by new development. They are authorized under state law and under the Growth Management Act. So they've been around since about 1990. And they're a funding source that is made available to communities to pay for the cost of capital needed to respond to growth. So impact fees can be structured in 4 different types of programs. Tonight, we're talking about transportation and parks, which I'll go into a little more depth about what transportation impact fees can fund, and Jason will go into a little more depth about what parks impact fees can fund. But do know there are a few other flavors that are allowed under Washington state law. One is impact fees aimed at fire infrastructure. Those are fairly atypical. There's only a few communities in Washington state that have those, but know that those are another option. And then schools. So impact fees can also fund the needs to fund school capital infrastructure expansion needed, again, for growth. So moving to transportation impact fees specifically, so transportation impact fees, they must be spent again on capital projects. And specifically, they need to be capital projects that are identified within the capital facilities element of your comprehensive plan. They must be spent on, again, transportation capital projects that are within the right of way of streets and roads. So that, certainly that can include sidewalks and bike facilities. It can include trail facilities that are directly adjacent to the roadway. And of course, it can also fund signals and other improvements. But generally, transportation capital improvements. I see we have a question, so I'm going to pause here and take that.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you from finishing your slide. You want to finish your slide and then I'll ask at the end?
Sure, I'll keep it brief. So this slide just really probably gives you more technical details than you want, but state law does provide us with kind of a pretty standard procedure for how we get from a list of projects and how we assess the amount of fees that can be charged of new development on a kind of a per trip basis. And that's a metric we use in transportation. So thinking about a new residential house tends to generate 1 p.m. peak hour trip. different types of commercial development, other development in the city, they have different impacts on your transportation system. And really the way the, kind of background for transportation impact fee programs is they're very much tied to the impacts of new development on your system. So that's all I got. Commissioner, I'd be happy to take your question or comment.
So just two quick questions. One is, what happens if it's not spent in 10 years? What happens to the money?
It needs to be reimbursed back to the developer. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I realized I skipped that. Really important that when you develop your transportation impact fee project list, and we'll talk about some of the updates we're making, really important that the community is thinking carefully about projects that it wants to construct, because you can only spend impact fees on projects that are in your program, and you do need to spend that money within 10 years. So it does require some tracking from the jurisdiction.
And the tracking point is really my second question, which is, I assume it's earmarked and somehow time stamped so that you know at any given time what impact fees are about to expire.
Yes, I think that's something, and I'm not into the nitty-gritty details of how communities are tracking that, but one thing that is pretty typical is to have a specific impact fee account to make sure that you are spending those funds. And I think most communities are using the oldest funds first.
And that is how
thank
we're
you.
doing it here in Mercer Island. We have a separate account for each type of impact fee, and we're tracking those revenues from the point that they are received.
So Kendra, I have a question for you. I do know something about impact fees, having litigated a few cases going back quite a few years. And the concept is that they are to fund the impacts of new development. Now, transportation fees are treated a little differently in the scope, but how do we on the island connect the dots between the new developments, whether it's a new home or a short plat or a building downtown or redeveloping downtown? How do we connect the dots between the individual, the PM peak hour trips, for example, and the projects?
Very good question. And I do have to ask one clarifying question. When you talk about a project, do you mean the transportation project or do you mean the development project?
No, the transportation project.
Perfect. So first of all, what we do is we assess impact fees based on the trip generation of the project. And so, there's some pretty standard transportation documentation, national documentation, such as the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, that gives us a sense of how many trips are being generated by new development. With respect to impacts on projects, state law provides us with a little bit of discretion, a little bit of wiggle room in how we do that, but still following this procedure to make sure that we're very much dotting our I's and crossing our T's. But what state law says is that you fund projects that are providing capacity. So they don't necessarily have to be projects that are imminently approaching failure. They are just projects that are accommodating additional trip making capacity within the city. So kind of our connection, we are doing a few steps. We're doing some modeling to understand where trips are going, and we're using the best tools we have for that to develop a reasonable project list and to kind of develop that nexus. But there isn't a requirement that for, this development that's generating 10 trips to actually trace that those 10 trips are passing through a given intersection. This isn't kind of a SEPA level, like that's a different level of rigor than is required for more programmatic impact fee programs.
Okay.
These are good questions. Anyone else before I continue on? All right, well, I'll keep going. So City of Mercer Island has a current program. It funds, and based on the last rate study, it funds about 14.6 million in capital projects. That's about 10 million in roadway projects and about 4 million in pedestrian and bike accommodating projects like trails and bike lanes and sidewalks. So based on this kind of program that was established, the current, and actually I should say the 2020, the slide is a little bit out of date, as I saw that you guys have updated your rates each year dutifully. But the current rate for Mercer Island as of about 2020, 2021 was $4,533 per single family home, $2,584 per multi-family dwelling unit. So that's like one apartment unit or one townhouse unit, and $18 per square foot of commercial space. So again, you guys have been updating your rate to inflation every year, construction cost increases. So actually this rate has actually floated up quite a bit. It's a few $100s higher than what I'm showing on the slide as of 2022, just given kind of some of the inflation that we've seen. So I'm going to keep going. Impact fees, this is actually your current kind of rate schedule that's in the impact fee program. So what you see on this slide is on the right-hand side, actually the projects that the current program is currently funding. And on the left-hand side is the rate schedule for the uses that were identified. And again, this rate schedule is in the old rate study. So this is back in 2015. All of these rates have increased a bit for construction cost increases over time. So, just a little bit of the why. Why are we updating the program today? First of all, city staff has acknowledged that Mercer Island's rate is actually fairly low when looking around your peers, particularly on the east side. And I know Kirkland is in the process of updating their rate. So I suppose I expect that they're probably going up. But I think there's just an expectation that Mercer Island's got a lot of transportation needs. You have a lot of projects that really could be accommodating growth. And so it makes sense to look at whether your current impact fee rate is appropriate. So with that, I will pause because I am done with the slide. And it looks like the commissioner's got a comment or a question.
I assume I'm being called on.
Yes.
So how is Mercer Island calculating its impact fees versus a Sammamish? Like why the wide discrepancy?
So all of the impact fees are calculated fairly similarly. There's kind of two pieces to the equation. One is the amount of, it's all of these impact fees are based on essentially a cost per trip. So it's a cost of eligible infrastructure divided by the amount of trip growth anticipated over kind of the horizon of the program. So Sammamish, I can speak to that. They have a really big project list. They're a community that was incorporated from King County in 2000. They had a lot of rural roads that lacked kind of urban amenities such as bike lanes, such as curb gutter and sidewalk. And so that community is really trying to upgrade and build a number of roadways. Meanwhile, Sammamish is, I don't want to say they're anti-growth, but the amount of growth that they anticipate over the next 15, 20 years is quite low. So that leads to a very, very high impact fee rate. And as you look at these peers, there's kind of different things at play. It's either a different expectation of what their eligible project list is or what the amount of growth that they have, that they expect.
Got it. Thank you.
So Kendra, you may have said this already, but what percentage of there was a slide one or two back that was had a $14 million number
Mhm.
Is that the total capital improvements? Or is that the amount funded by impact fees? And if that's the total, my question is, what percentage of our capital plan relating to transportation is funded by impact fees?
So I can't speak to your total capital plan, but you're actually asking a very, very good question. So actually, I'm going to advance to the next slide because you've provided just a great segue for that. So of the $14 million capital project list, that was just the sheer number. We looked at what are all the eligible projects that we've identified that could receive impact fee funding. And the estimated capital value of those projects was about 14 million. It was not anticipated that 14 million would necessarily be generated by impact fees.
Right.
So each of those projects is going to be funded by a variety of sources, local sources, state sources, maybe some federal funds, private sources, impact fees. All of those work together to fund your projects, and it varies on a project by project basis. One thing I will say, as we began the update, the first step we did was to work with city staff to think about, well, what is an updated list of projects? You know, certainly planning has continued since 2015, and there are a number of new needs that have been found. And certainly there have also been projects that have been constructed and completed that are no longer needed to be on that list. So there was a real interest in refreshing that list. The other thing that we found as we started looking at the list is that many of the capital costs that the city has on the books were very, very outdated. The 2015 study kind of gleaned the latest and greatest and most available project costs that were available at the time, but some of those were 4 and 5 years old. So now we're facing project, capital cost estimates that are more than 10 years old in some cases, or non-existent for some of the new projects. So the city has hired us to refresh the cost estimates for the projects that are on the list. And so that, of course, is influencing the amount of eligible. So not only changes in the project list, but also changes in the cost estimate are influencing kind of what our eligibility calculations are looking like. So that's something that our team is working on really closely with your engineering staff right now to get that refined. And over the next month or so, we're going to be ready to provide some recommendations about kind of what the next impact fee rate might be. I would anticipate it will be somewhere north of what you have today, although the amount of increase has yet to be determined.
Victor, do you have another question? Or is that an old hand?
Sorry, that's an old hand.
It's a new term for me, old hands. So we'll be coming back with kind of the draft rate study. We'll be sharing it both with this body and then, of course, with City Council. So I think that's all I had for my update. If there's no other questions on transportation, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague who will be speaking about parks impact fees.
So just before we segue to Jason, are things like, new overlays or repaving eligible projects?
It's a mixed bag. So I don't like to say no. We do need to have a capacity argument. So repaving generally not, but sometimes overlays, if they do provide a capacity element. For example, it's an overlay that's also leading to a restripe that's helping you to reconfigure the way that the curb to curb is being used to be more efficient. Sometimes that can be an eligible expense.
Okay. Carolyn.
Yeah, one of your slides mentioned that some cities are including projects for multimodal transportation in their list of eligible projects. I just wondered, is Mercer Island doing that? Is that in our list at present?
It isn't your list. Excuse me. It is on your list. You've got about 4 million in multimodal projects on your current list. And in your updated list that, of course, we're working with your engineering staff, and I would say there's actually a good number of sidewalk improvements and bicycle-oriented projects. So a good number of multimodal projects on that list as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Kendra? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to give it to Jason.
Good evening. My name is Jason Hennessy. I'm with Burke Consulting. I'm a senior associate where I lead our finance and economics group. So I'm going to kind of just pick up where Kendra left off and talk about the park impact fee update. In many ways, it's similar to transportation. I've outlined here kind of what input data we use and what specific sources we're using for our update in 2022. So we'll just kind of, I'm going to go quickly through the process. So just like transportation, we start with our growth projections that tells us what's going to expected to happen in the future. In this specific case, we're using the 2022 through 2044 recently adopted King County countywide planning policies that set a target for housing units and employment for 2044. Still getting used to saying 2044. And so those give us an estimate for what's expected as far as growth goes, official targets set by the county. From there, we look at what the level of service is. So the level of service is a kind of abstract concept that's thrown around a lot. And impact fees, it matters quite a bit. It says this is what our expectation is to respond to the future. For parks, there's a classic level of service that was number of acres per thousand of people that started off in the 60s. And things have grown much more sophisticated since then in that approach, but it provides a simple illustration of how that works. So if we were to expect 1,000 people, that level of service standard would tell us to add 1 acre if it's 1 acre per 1,000 people. It's just a rate, essentially. So we will be looking at the value per capita, which is what we use in 2015. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Oh, sorry, Kendra. I knew. Ooh, bad phrase, right? It's like anyway. Next, we'll identify the future needs. So this is the project list, just like Kendra was talking about. We are kind of got lucky that the PROS plan was just updated, so we were able to just pull the capital list from that. We didn't have nearly as much work as Fair and Peers did for transportation. We could just grab that project list, and that's core to our study. But like for transportation, we do need to estimate how much of those projects are related to growth related to development. So working with staff, we went through the capital list, got a proportion of each project that's related to growth. Under state law, we're required to also account for the expected revenues that new people will bring in. So the idea here is that a new resident is not just a burden, but also pays taxes. And so we need to account for that amount when we're doing the calculation. Currently, for most parks capital projects, the city is using REIT, general fund grants and user fees. And so we have looked at the expected amount and got a per capita contribution for capital. And as we move through those steps, we get to a nice updated rate study and impact fee schedule. So now the next slide. I'm going to dig a little bit into, since the project plan was simple, it just came from the PROS, the level of service standard is worth talking about because it's a little abstract. So the per capita level of service standard says, we as a jurisdiction have invested in our parks quite a bit, in fact. And so we would like to continue and maintain an investment similar to what has been done in the past moving forward. So should it be, and I have a very draft value in here of 30,000, which is why it's nice and neat and bright red. Should it be that when we look at the value of the land and the improvements we've made to it, it comes out to somewhere around $30,000 per person, a level of service standard using a per capita value would say, we hope to invest $30,000 in our park system for every person that moves here. Now, in practice, especially Mercer Island, being an island community where land is limited, and there will be no more, land values are quite high, and that leads this per capita value to be significant. So we are not expecting that this value will be actually what happens in the future, and that's fine. There's no requirement that a level of service standard be met maybe in the future. There's just no way that that level of investment could continue, but that's still a target. And so that provides our ceiling for how much in theory could be charged. Oh, and there is one quick note. Sadly, when we did this in 2015, the county was at the time assessing the value of parklands. It's no longer assessing government lands at all. And so this time around, we use a methodology that we've used in other jurisdictions, looking at all privately held land within a half mile of the park, looking at the value per acre, and then applying that. As you can imagine, a number of these parks are near waterfront properties, and their land values are very, very high. And so when you kind of take this calculation through, it leads to a number that's quite high, but it also makes sense. The community has invested by, Luther Burbank's a great example. The community has invested by setting that land apart and saying this is a public good, and has given up quite a bit of taxable value. So it follows logically. It's just it's a big number. I think currently it's floating at 1.5 billion, and I'm working with our GIS analyst because that number seems really high to me. But those big pieces of property would be something that if the city were to try to replace Luther Burbank, buying up the parcels of similar size and adding them together, it may well be in that ballpark over many, many years. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Park capital needs. Oh, I guess I did have a slide. So quite simple. We just start off with what was in the pros plan. There were 90 projects identified for the 2022 year period included in the pros plan. Those totaled just shy of $50 million in today dollars. Like I said, we worked with staff to go through and say, okay, let's go project by project, all 90. How much of these are related to growth from development? And so after we do that, we say about $4.3 million, or a little less than 10% of that capital project list is related to growth. Yeah. Okay, and we have a slightly different time frame of 2041, so we're also kind of cutting off a couple of years because we're looking at a 20-year period for our capital growth, but it doesn't affect much here. So I think if we go on to the next slide, I, like Kendra, oh, actually, this is probably a good place to pause. Oh, a couple of questions. Kate, Commissioner Hughes, I think you were first. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. A quick question.
Mhm.
What kind of metrics are used to determine that a project is related to growth?
That's a great question. Unlike transportation, where we know a property generates X number of trips, or at least there's a nice engineering manual that estimates that, we have to rely on subject matter expertise. Your park staff know why these projects are happening. They know what capacity is being added. That capacity is a key word across any type of parking, or excuse me, any kind of impact fee. So we went project by project and said, hey, if you're replacing a bathroom, are you also adding a stall, which is increased capacity over its current, or is it just a replacement? Because if you're replacing capital, that's not related to growth, that's just maintenance. So going each project, we asked staff to consider, okay, what are you doing there? And what of that is going to be adding capacity? And then on top of that, how much of that is specifically related to growth as a development, new units and or commercial? Does that answer your question? Great. Commissioner Rice?
So right before you switch slides there, you mentioned,
Can we go back one? Yeah.
well, it's not really related to
Oh,
the slide
okay.
itself, but you mentioned 20 years. And I wanted to know, is this different than the traffic impact fee where park impact fees need to be used over a 20-year period, whereas traffic needs to be in 10? Or
No, all impact fees on GMA authorized impact fees in Washington state need to be expended with a 10-year window of collection. But that's a rolling, I mean, so anything that's collected this year, the next year you get 10 years from that date. And so 20 years is just the typical planning window for the comp plan. And so we kind of default back to that. Originally, it was 6 years when those, and which aligned well with capital planning as actually happens in the CIP. But unfortunately, especially less so in parks, but transportation, where they have major projects that may need many years to collect up the fees, jurisdictions were just not able to expend their fees in time. So the legislature heard that and expanded to 10, but that's led us in this weird situation where sometimes it's 6 years, sometimes it's 10 years, and sometimes it's 20 years. It would be nice if they would just expand it to 20, but we're dealing with the legislation we have.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Friedman.
Yeah, could you go back 2 slides to the level of service standard slide? I'm sorry, I didn't understand the connection. You were talking about properties within a half-mile radius of a park and that they are extremely valuable, but I missed how how that relates to this.
Oh, sure, yeah. So to get an estimated value of the city's park holdings, we took each park parcel and looked at the parcels within a half-mile radius of each of those, and then looked at their assessed value. And that's all because, unfortunately, King County has stopped assessing government-owned lands. So I happen to have done this study in 2015 for the city of Mercer Island. And at that time, we could just go grab values off King County's website and say, okay, this land's worth this. Now we have no value at all. And so to get to at least an estimate, that's where that half-mile radius is coming in.
What is the purpose of knowing the value of the park?
So the per capita value level of service standard is based upon the investment that's been made by the city as a dollar amount. And then, so we kind of get this gigantic numerator, and then we divide that by the current population, and that gets us our value per capita. So those land values are added into also the improvements that have been made, swing sets, docks, all the rest of that, buildings, to get to the numerator. And then from there, we get to the per capita.
Okay, so the $30,000 per capita is the value of our parks divided by the number of homes, or residents?
Residents. Yeah,
So
it's an
people,
oh, sorry.
human beings.
Yeah.
Beings or dwellings?
Human beings.
Okay. All right. I'd love to see that math.
So, Jason, let me jump in here a little bit, because you mentioned that the old school method of looking at this was to determine the amount of park acreage and facilities, et cetera, based on the population. And then you would determine whether your existing park system had adequate parks and facilities for new growth, or whether it needed new parks and new facilities to serve those new residents as they moved in. As I understand that this method was developed as an alternative to that, and being a bit of a cynic on this issue, I believe, for some place like Mercer Island and probably some other communities, they had shall we say, a surplus of parks and facilities based on acre per number of people, acre per 1,000 people or whatever. And so they were not able to assess park fees. And so they moved to this methodology to try and continue to justify the park fees. But I think, Jordan, you're struggling with the same thing I struggle with on this, and that is, how does this relate to the actual needs? How's this $30,000 number relate to the actual needs of new residents using the parks? And how does our system, given the rather large number of park areas we have, stack up under sort of the old school method of looking at this? If you know.
So you're asking if you were benchmarked against your neighbors, what would you look like? Is that the question?
No, it's more a question of, if you look at it from the old school standpoint of saying this per capita dollar amount is not really relevant to what the needs, what the capacity is and what the future needs may be. My question would be, how does our system stand up to, in terms of what our level of service is measured by acres per 1,000 people, for example?
Well, I don't know if this will put the cynic to rest, but I would, if we take that 1960s era level of service standard and we just run with it for a bit, if it's based upon the number of acres per people and we add people, is it conceivable that Mercer Island is going to be able to buy acres of parks? I don't think that the city at this point is trying to add more acreage, and nor would they be able to afford. So that, in some ways, is kind of the crux of the issue. In a place like Mercer Island, where there's a very limited amount of land, that sort of level of service standard is not really useful anymore because it's not something you could do. Or if we take the city of Renton, for example, they have ones that are facility based, so many soccer fields per 1,000 or per 5,000, but same idea. It's very prescriptive. It says, okay, you've added 5,000 people, you need to add a new soccer field. But if soccer has fallen out of favor or soccer numbers are down, this is happening with baseball, not to pick on baseball, but baseball's is seeing fewer users. It tells you must do this because that's what your level of service standard is. So you have to find a place to shoehorn in a soccer field. You may not have the room for that given your just limited capacity on land. So I appreciate where you're coming from, and I don't disagree that there may be some self-serving purposes, but I think that's not the whole picture, in the sense of it would be impossible, I believe, for Mercer Island to use some of those because I don't know where you would put the things physically. So that's why we talk about capacity. It can be frustrating for planners to use a per capita value because it doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you to invest. There's something very nice and clean about the old style. It says, okay, you had so many people come, now you add one of these. And this doesn't do that. It just tells you need to add capacity, but that also allows you to be nimble and respond to changing trends in recreation and what people are actually doing outdoors. So, for example, and I know I've been kind of rattling on here for a while, pickleball. I don't know that anyone would have seen pickleball coming, and now it is a major force that every parks department must deal with. And so if you had a tennis level of service standard, you would be still putting in tennis courts when the demand is really about pickleball. And of course, you could update your level of service standards, but you've collected fees based upon a tennis court. There's always a lag between these things. It's just not very nimble.
Yeah, what I've seen is, or looked at over the years, is the difference between active and versus passive recreation, and we have a lot of both on the island. But I agree with you that it's a lagging issue, because baseball might be popular at one point, but it's not forever. But the other question I was getting at was, if we look at it more in the capacity with regard to what we have, and maybe look at it through the lens of active versus passive recreation, active example being the skate park or the baseball fields or soccer fields, and passive being the large wooded areas we have with trails. Do we have a sense as to how Mercer Island registers or stacks up on per capita park capacity or level of service in those two areas, the active versus passive?
Allison, I'm wondering if this question came up during the pros process. This would be something that might have been included in the public survey. And that would be something that would generally speak more to Vice Chair Murphy's question than an impact fee study. And I don't know, do you have any information that might be?
I don't off the top of my head, because I
Okay.
really was not involved with the pros plan at all, but that's definitely something we can check on with our parks team and get more information for the next meeting.
I'm sorry that I don't have a satisfying answer,
No, that's like-
or even an answer, it seems.
Yeah, it's all right. Victor, do you have another question or comment?
I do. I'll comment is I'm struggling with the same thing you are, Mike, in terms of the calculation and the value per capita. My question is, what are the surrounding communities doing? Are they actually calculating this in the same way, or are we unique here?
This is a common and increasingly becoming more so level of service standard because of its flexibility. I'll need to get back to you about, I haven't looked at a while at how Sammamish or Issaquah, for example. Those are some examples that I have in a slide coming up. Actually, can we move to the next slide, Kendra, if you're still okay? Well, I don't want to, let me, I'll come back to you with an answer on that. I believe that a couple of these are doing per capita and possibly all of them, but I want to check, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll continue, but please feel free to raise your hand. Like Kendra, I grabbed the wrong year. I don't have a good excuse. I apparently am still just living in 2021 because I saw the 2022 number and just thought, oh, we're in 2021. So it doesn't change the position here. The current single family value for parks is 2,600 and the multifamily is 1,672. And so it wouldn't change this graph. They'd just be a little bit higher. Still lower than typical comparisons. These are actually, it's something that Commissioner Friedman had mentioned earlier about the kind of the unit versus the housing unit, dwelling unit versus people. These are collected on a per unit basis as development happens. And there is this connection between how many people are living in a unit versus how many people, or how many, kind of losing the thread of my own there. We have to make a connection between how many people we expect to be in a unit to make a fair value of how much we should be charging, and which that's something that later on, when we get to the actual impact fee draft, is dealt with at length. I think we can go ahead and I'm nearly done. So commercial development is much less common. We were asked to look at it in 2015, and the city council ultimately decided to not collect park impact fees on commercial development. We have been asked to also consider it in 2022. You can see that of our 5 comparison set there, that 2 of them have a commercial impact fee for parks. Unlike residential, which are collected on a per unit basis, these are almost always, and these 2 definitely are collected on a per square feet basis. The idea here being that customers who are drawn to a business and or employees have park facilities available to them for lunch hour, or if you go to a restaurant and get food, this is a community's choice, this is a policy choice, whether or not these are included. These are here, for example, and you can see that Issaquah is kind of an outlier there with its retail. I think one more slide. Yeah. Okay. So kind of, this is sort of like the big arrow slide, but we've refreshed the data. We're in the process of calculating impact fee rates. We have draft versions, but there are still some pieces like that level of service standard that we're trying to make sure that we feel really confident in. There are some policy recommendations that will be coming from council about what gets included. And finally, to update them will require city council action, which includes those policy decisions. I think, Kendra, am I right that was my last slide? Kind of takes over my screen. Yep, okay. All right, more questions.
So Jason, in the last slide here, you have the reference to inclusion of commercial, and sounds like we may be getting some direction from council on that. Maybe go back to Redmond and Issaquah. What's the rationale for including commercial in the park impact fee calc, or assigning a park impact fee to commercial property?
The general concept there is that employees and or customers to commercial use parks as, you know, either like I said, a lunch venue for employees is a common thing, or that people, as part of their, if I come to a restaurant and then take my food and go to the park to eat it, which has definitely been happening a lot more with the pandemic, you can see, I think that concept is pretty clear to us now, especially when it comes to something like retail, where we might go and get food and then take it to a park. So those are park users, and it is related to the development of commercial. Like I said, they are rare, and I don't personally have a feeling one way or another about them. So
Jordan, or I'm not sure who had their hand up first there. Go ahead, Jordan.
Well, I know this is kind of, you know, this is not our agenda, but your presentation just makes me wonder, yours and Kendra's, when comparing Mercer Island's impact fees to our peers. You know, we always talk in this community on this island about how our city struggles for revenue, and I just like, am I missing something, or have we been leaving a lot of money on the table that our city could desperately needs? And again, it's a question and a comment, and I'm just curious because we always say like, oh, poor Mercer Island, we don't have enough retail to generate the sales tax revenue, that other cities around the area enjoy. And here is a glaring opportunity. It seems like a glaring opportunity that we've missed because we have such relatively low impact fees. So I just wonder what everyone else thinks about that.
If I may, the statute that authorizes Growth Management Act impact fees is very, very clear that each capital project must be directly related to growth. And it is only that portion that can be funded by impact fees.
Right.
And so to the extent that growth happens on Mercer Island, that's what impact fees should be paying for. And collected. I think that part of the reason that Kendra mentioned earlier for Sammamish is a great example where they have more opportunity for growth because they're not hemmed in on an island. And so they have a lot more capital needs that are growth related. So if growth is small, then the capital needs coming from that are also relatively small.
Really? I mean, that actually doesn't quite make sense to me because I would think that it's proportional. The impact is, if it's one new house being built, it has, it's proportional to how much impact they have. So
Well, what I mean is that you've had maybe 500 units added in the last 6 years in a time when Sammamish, I don't know, Kendra, I'm not sure if you off the top of your head could cite the figure, but it's a much, much, much larger number. So it's just generating a greater capital need is what I was trying to say. No, that's fair. It's an unfair thing to ask you.
Victor?
So I have two questions. Question number one is, I'm going to take the flip side of your question, Vice Chair Murphy, and I'm going to ask if Allison or if anyone understands the rationale for the exclusion of commercial on the park impact fees.
Well, I believe that decision back in 2015, 2016 was made because the council at that time felt the majority of the use of parks was from residents, and so it made sense to focus the fees there. Also, there were some concerns about the amount of impact fees that would be assessed to commercial uses and the impact of that on the costs of opening a new business in Mercer Island.
So, and that actually is a great segue to my second question, which is, can you explain exactly how these commercial impact fees work? Is it a new development goes in, and if that is net new space, there's an impact fee, or if it's an existing vacant space that's taken by a business, there's a commercial impact fee there as well?
Well, it depends. So there absolutely is an impact fee if a new building is built that has commercial space. For existing buildings,
There's absolutely a park impact fee for.
There's not a
that.
park impact fee currently,
Okay.
but there are transportation impact fees.
But I'm
And-
talking specifically about park here.
Okay, so we don't currently charge park impact fees for commercial
Right.
at all.
Right. But the way this would work would be,
So it would be the same as the way it works for transportation impact fees currently. So, well, it'd be similar. Transportation impact fees are based on the use, the land use of the property. So like retail, restaurant, personal service, there's a whole list of different kinds of uses and there's different trip generation numbers depending on the use. And so the impact fees are different. And if there's a change of use of the property, you would pay a prorated impact fee, transportation impact fee. But for parks, there would not be a differential based on the use. And so for existing spaces, there would not be an impact fee if a different tenant came in, with the exception that if the space is vacant for 12 months or longer, then an impact fee is charged when a new tenant comes after that vacancy.
And is that charged to the business or the property owner?
It's charged to the applicant for the permit, for the tenant improvement permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Kate, did you have a question?
It was more of a discussion point. You know, Jordan asked if we are missing out on a funding source. Is this an appropriate time to engage in that discussion?
Let's see if we have any more questions on, well, no, go ahead.
It's kind of a question. I'm just wondering how generational equity factors into this. You know, you talked, Jason, a bit about investment that's been made in the past, and you know, we got 77 acres of Luther Burbank Park for 1.6 million through forward thrust bonds. So, you know, and the city got that. I don't know how much we paid for it. I think it was just a transfer to the city from King County. So we got that park, you know, for a song. So as much as I want to honor and respect the investments and the set-asides that were made in the past, you know, I think putting a huge burden on new homeowners relative to the rest of the community, I'm wondering about that. How is that treated in this impact fee process? Because it is so much more difficult to buy a home these days. You know, cash offers well over market value. And I continue to be curious about the professional judgment as opposed to metrics on choosing how growth. I think I'll need to follow up with city staff on that. Maybe Allison can fill me in on that. Where do I get answers to these questions or concerns?
Carolyn?
And just a brief response to Jordan. I mean, you know, when we look at the comparison between Mercer Island and the other cities, you know, there's a very large gap, but, you know, there are some unique characteristics of Mercer Island compared to those other cities that can be responsible for a good deal of that gap. We really won't know, but I'm very enthusiastic about, you know, getting all of the impact fee money that we can get, that we are legally justified to get. And that's, you know, that will be the purpose of this whole process. It'll be interesting to see if that gap closes a little bit after we reconsider what our rates should be. Vice Chair Murphy, I have a question about the transportation side of things whenever you feel that's a good time.
Let's finish up parks and then
Sure.
we can go back to that. Any more comments on the park issue while Jason is here? Tiffin?
I had a question about the crediting process for the commercial. I always thought it was that you do get a credit for, say, your square footage for commercial if we did have park impact fees. So like if one tenant left and a new one came in, I didn't realize there would be a new impact fee potentially implemented. I always thought it was like kind of a credit basis. It was only for like basically new square footage, new apartments, that kind of thing.
Well, it's only if the space is vacant for over 12 months, and that's part of the state statute.
So like if you, for example, had a building, you knocked it down, it would presumably take more than 12 months to rebuild. So then all the new space would then be subject to the commercial impact fee.
Anything that's demolished and rebuilt would be subject to the impact fees. And then if there's existing commercial spaces that sit vacant for at least 12 months, then
Okay.
it's
All right. Thank you.
It's a new fee.
So Allison, did you say the 12-month period of no occupancy, that's in RCW 8202?
Yeah, I believe so. We've had a lot of questions about it as spaces in town center have turned over and new tenants have come in. Because there have occasionally been times when this happened and then a new tenant is trying to lease a space and do a tenant improvement, and we are saying, oh, well, you're subject to impact fees. And sometimes for a new business that could be, you know, $30,000-$40,000, which is a really unexpected cost when they're trying to open up. And so we looked into this pretty carefully with the city attorney, and he confirmed that we do need to charge these if the space was vacant for 12 months.
Yeah, it seems to me that, you know, given what our other objectives are with town center, that we might want to be very careful about the whole concept of impact fees in the commercial area. That, you know, that I'm mindful of Carolyn's comment of that it's nice to collect the money, but we might need to be thinking about how these things work at cross purposes.
Well, and you also need to keep in mind that the total amount of impact fee that can be collected would not change if we added commercial. It would just spread the peanut butter a little thinner. So residences would pay a bit less and commercial would pay a part of it. So we wouldn't.
Yeah, I think obviously the bigger number is probably in the transportation side of things. Carolyn, did you have another comment about the transportation side?
Yes, I have a question about the transportation impact fees. In determining the value of the eligible projects to base the impact fee upon, do we have a level of service standard for multimodal projects that is guiding you? I know we have one for transportation, well, for vehicular transportation projects, but do we have a level of service standard for multimodal?
That's a fairly new area of practice. And so the way that it was calculated back in 2015 was a comparison of an estimate of who would be using those facilities. So I want to just give an example for a stretch of sidewalk. We know that a certain number of people are using them today. And based on the amount of growth that we're expecting in Mercer Island, we can make estimates about the number of people who might be using them in the future. I think the short answer to your question, Commissioner, is that there isn't a clear methodology for multimodal facilities, but we have come up with a methodology to essentially make sure that we're not charging for existing need. And so we really are just charging for the need that's driven by additional growth within your community. And that's a methodology that's actually stood the test in well over 10 communities.
I think I have bike paths in mind even more because, you know, for example, a new business coming in or development could really bring more people needing and using bike paths. So, and I don't know what other things we should be talking about besides pedestrian and bike, but how about the bike side of things?
We're using the same procedure that I just mentioned for both bikes and for sidewalks.
Mm-hmm. It's possible that, well, that I'm going to get too into the weeds. So thank you. But let's leave it right there.
No worries.
Thanks.
Tiffin? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can I follow up and just ask what project list you're using for the non-motorized? Are you taking that out of the TIP or out of the bike and ped plan? How are those projects feeding into the calculation for the impact fees?
We've been working very closely with your public works department to update kind of a list of projects that they think, first of all, pass our eligibility scrutiny. So many are on your TIF. With the ped and bike plan projects, one thing that we'll need to be careful of is to make sure that they actually do have a home in your comprehensive plan and your capital facilities element. And so that's one additional step. It's required by state law. So just to make sure that projects are located in the right places to make sure they can be included in your program. Of course, you as a community have the opportunity to update your comprehensive plan and make sure those projects are included. So that's something that we navigate with every community.
So I think in the upcoming comp plan update, one of the sort of scope items is to incorporate the bike and ped plan as part of the comprehensive, or adopt it as part of it. So would that help it qualify, or?
Yes.
Okay, so basically if we do that, then those projects would qualify and can feed into this system.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
My only comment on that, Kendra, is it correct that whatever we have in the bike and ped plan to be eligible would have to be serving new growth, or a component of it would have to be targeted to serve new growth?
There are two kind of, well, yes, that's one of the eligibility criteria. Two that we have in mind. One is that it's within the right of way of streets and roads. So a trail that's, for example, running through Luther Burbank Park, if it's not within the right of way of streets and roads, it would not meet the eligibility criteria for a transportation impact fee program. That does not mean preclude it from a parks impact fee program, but that is some specific language. And then the second piece of that is that we do need to make a determination that it's providing person trip carrying capacity. So that is a way that we can recognize the capacity contributions of projects like sidewalks and bikeway projects, is that they actually do help to move more people. Either it's giving pedestrians a place to walk, or it's getting pedestrians out of the street so they're not mingling with cars, and they're providing a more safe and just higher mobility environment.
Okay. Carolyn.
Yeah, I have a few more questions about bicycle trails. Just a little bit earlier, we're talking about things being located in the right places, and I wasn't quite sure what that was referring to. That's my first question. Do you remember?
Well, the only thing that I think what you might be asking about is the location within the right of way of streets and roads. And that is language that's coming straight out of the state legislation. So unfortunately, that does tie our hands in terms of some of the projects that we might otherwise like to fund.
Okay, got that. And then level of service, doesn't that involve, I mean, the way you described how what you're basing it on is the number of people using it. Doesn't level of service involve more than simply the number of people using it? Isn't it something to do with the quality of the facility and, you know, how well it moves people through and things like that? And go ahead.
Oh, yes, for intersections, for sure. We are absolutely evaluating those. And one of the criterion is that for level of service is looking at whether or not it's meeting your city standard. If the facility isn't meeting your city standard, an example might be an intersection improvement. It's currently stop signs right now, lots of delay, not operating well. You need to put a signal or a roundabout in place. And so it's not to say that that project isn't eligible, but one step we need to take is to take out the cost of what we call an existing deficiency. And so that's kind of from a level of service standpoint, you know, a really clear metric in the way that it's feeding into our transportation analysis. For the perspective of ped and bike facilities, there's not, you know, as mathematical of clear guidance for doing that work. And so the way that I've described it in terms of that fair share, that's kind of the way that we're approaching it. And for ped and bike, I do a lot of ped and bike plans. So there are some methods that are emerging, but you know, something we know about your sidewalks, it isn't physical space for the most part. It's not that we're, you know, in Manhattan or a huge city where there's just so many people on the sidewalks that there's not room to maneuver. It really, from Mercer Highlands standpoint, is more of a connectivity standpoint. So does the sidewalk, does it actually carry me all the way along the street to the place that I need to be? And so really, when we think about quality in Mercer Island. It's much more connectivity and provision of the facility.
So, thank you. And also though, for bike passage, I'm thinking in terms of separation from traffic, for example, as a factor, safety issues. Wouldn't those have something to do with the level of services being provided as well?
Well, what I would actually say is that the projects, and this is actually more of a discussion around the types of projects. So an impact fee isn't really a place where we're doing a ton of level of service assessment. That's really in designing your facility. So that level of thought has gone into your ped and bike plan. And I would anticipate as the city's updating its comprehensive plan, it's really being thoughtful about this. I know the city is doing the Island Crest bikeway project. I know I'm jumbling the names there, but a lot of thought is being put into making sure that it's providing a really comfortable facility for people who are looking to bike. And as that project enters your comprehensive plan and your capital facilities element, that'd be a great project to fund with impact fees.
Okay, so level of service is probably going to be spelled out or is spelled out in our bike ped plan, but it's not, it will be updated and will be adopted to be part of our comp plan. But are we basically missing it then? If that bike ped plan is adopted next year and you're doing the studies this year, is that going to sort of essentially be missed until the next time the city does a rate study?
Well, the city can update its project list and its rate study whenever it wants. So you certainly, there's nothing that says you need to wait 5 or 10 years to do so. What I would say is that right now, as we've seen from comparing Mercer Island to your neighbors, you're probably not charging as much as you could. And in something I know in working with your public works department is that there's a great number of needs in the city that are very impact fee eligible. So the interest at this point is to update the list to kind of get those projects, get them funded with the recognition that that project list could be updated as new projects emerge.
I know our packet probably explains this pretty well, but just while we're in the discussion for clarification, annually our administrative directors and so on can assess whether they're charging the right fee for the projects. I can't recall are you saying you can change that project list every year and then determine, use the percentages or whatever that you establish with this study that you're doing and then apply it to that new list?
There's a lot of the technical processes that can move forward. I mean, we'd have to look, but it's routine that I work with communities, and when they want to add a few projects to their list and take a few projects out, it's a pretty perfunctory process. I mean,
Okay.
it's the math is not super complicated.
Good, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Well, I think that Allison, anything else from you?
Nope, we'll just be back next month with a draft code amendment for your review and approval. I had that outlined as part of the memo in your packet. It's pretty straightforward. It's just right now the code includes a specific reference to the 2015 rate study and the actual rates that were established at that time. And so we want to move to a more generic code language that'll just refer to the most recent rate study that's been approved by the city council. And then we'll, we update the rates every year based on the construction cost index, and then those are adopted as part of the fee schedule by city council. So we'll use that process to update the fees each year and ensure that if there's a new rate study, those fees are incorporated into the fee schedule.
Okay, great. All right, Kendra, Jason, thank you for your presentations, and we can move on to the next item of regular. Oh, Carolyn, did you have something?
No, just waving goodbye at our lovely speakers.
Okay, so the next item is number 3 on the agenda, ZTR 21003, the state mandated code amendments, and I think Adam Zach, the senior planner, has a presentation for us.
Actually, I'm doing the presentation. Adam's here as well. We worked on this together, but I'm decided to give him a break since he's been doing a lot of the presentations lately. All right, I shared my screen. Hopefully you all can see it. I've got a pretty short slide deck here I'll go through, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Just start this in presentation
So I
mode.
don't think you're in, yeah, that's good, yeah.
You got it now. Okay,
got it.
my
Good.
video has been really laggy, so I apologize if things are going slow. I'm not quite sure why. All right, so tonight, I really just want to brief you on this project, this code amendment. This is something that came from the state legislature over the last couple of years. There were these two bills passed in 2020 and 2021. The first one, ESSB 5235, prohibits cities from regulating or limiting the number of unrelated people who may occupy a house or dwelling unit. So we currently, well, up until last fall, we had a regulation saying that you couldn't have more than 6 unrelated people in a dwelling. And likewise, ESHB 1023 says that we need to increase the limit on the number of adults in an adult family home to 8. It was previously 6. So last fall, the city council adopted an interim ordinance establishing some regulations related to this. There's another piece of legislation, 1220, that also had some state mandated code amendments required. We're going to be bringing that item to the Planning Commission probably this summer. It's a little more complicated, so we kind of split these apart. But that one had a timeline for compliance that was September 30th, 2021. And so we adopted these interim regulations last September to comply with all 3 pieces of these legislation at the same time. And now we're taking these 2 first, and we'll come back with the 3rd item later in the year. Just to kind of walk you through the amendments that we're proposing here, they're pretty simple, but they do have somewhat of an impact. So the first is to amend the definition of family, and we're recommending removing the requirement that members of a family be related by blood or marriage, and also to remove the occupancy restriction for unrelated people. And we need to also amend the definition of dwelling to be consistent with that definition of family. And then the accessory dwelling unit code needs a couple of changes because it includes that term family as well and had a reference to the occupancy limit that needs to be removed. And then finally, the definition of adult family home, we're just simply increasing it from 6 people to 8 people. So I've got these here just to show what those look like really quickly. So there's a lot of complicated language here that we're proposing to delete that was referring to some previous federal legislation, I believe, and getting rid of all of that and trying to go to a more direct and straightforward definition of what is a family and kind of get out of the business of regulating what a family is and just say it's really a group of people that live together and share the responsibilities for the dwelling. And then the dwelling unit definition, it's specifically called out multifamily dwellings, which didn't really make sense because dwelling units could be single family or multifamily. So we're suggesting to change that to a part of or a building or a contiguous portion of a building that provides complete independent living facilities. So again, just trying to be pretty direct about what it is we're talking about. This is the ADU code, and it referred to an immediate family member. And so we're suggesting some language there that doesn't use the word family. Rather, it just refers to the specific relationships that may have been intended there. Of course, this could be reduced or expanded depending on how the commission thinks that should be defined. And then we're recommending deleting this section that referred to the occupancy limits in the definitions. And finally, the adult family home definition, it's literally just changing the number of people that can be served from 6 to 8. So that's what I've got for that one. We're planning to come back next month with a public hearing, and then it would go for council review this summer. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Carolyn?
You're muted, Carolyn.
Yeah, in regards to the definition of a family, you know, it occurs to me that we're kind of trying to define it based on the behavior of the individuals who are living in the space. And I can think of any number of people who probably consider themselves part of a family, but who don't exercise much responsibility for chores or household maintenance or even expenses. But it's really clear that, you know, one or more persons occupying a dwelling unit and sharing common areas, that's pretty much a given. But the part about what they do when they're there, it kind of feels a little bit, you know, like we're trying to prescribe the behavior. Is there a reason why that has to be in there, you think?
Well, one thing we were trying to parse out was the difference between like a rooming house and a family. So, you know, you could have a situation where rooms in a house are rented out individually and those people have separate leases and they don't share expenses or food or chores. They each just rent their room. And so we're trying to distinguish that kind of situation from a situation where, you know, you have a group of people that live together and do share, you know, the responsibility for the cost of the dwelling and the utilities and everything like that goes into living there.
Do we need to have a definition for something different, like a rooming house? I mean, or just wonder why we might need to differentiate here on Mercer Island.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this definition is one that has been picked up by a number of jurisdictions to try to comply with the state legislation. And it's something that's, I know, is being used in some other neighboring jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I had also a comment about owner occupancy. The change that you have proposed, you know, makes complete sense, the first sentence. But the second sentence, the second sentence that goes on to say owner occupancy is defined as a property owner. I wonder if that sentence isn't actually trying to define what is meant by an owner. Because that's what the whole sentence goes on to say. What is an owner? Defined as a property owner. I think that word occupancy seems to kind of confuse what the sentence is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it could say the property. Yeah.
Yeah, the owner is defined as a property owner, blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, okay, thanks. Those are just my couple things that puzzled me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Kiffin?
Yeah, thanks. I actually was kind of zeroing in on the same things. For owner occupancy, I guess my question is, if you try to list all these sorts of relationships, you're inevitably leaving something out, like aunt, niece, cousin. And so I guess I maybe ask what the function is of this definition and what you're trying to do with it? And can you just leave it as a family member? Do you have to be so specific as to name these relationships?
Well, because we now are having family be a defined term, and the proposed definition basically says a family is a group of people that live together and are jointly responsible for their home. I think if we kept the term family here, it would have the result that anyone could qualify for this owner occupancy if they had been living with the legal property owner.
Yeah, no, I
So
get that.
if
It's
the
kind of,
property owner decides to-
a cyclical issue. I get that. So maybe could we go back to family and look at that for a second?
Sure.
And then I guess I also have to understand I would assume family has quite a few uses in our city code.
It's mainly, well, in the development code, it's mainly used in the terms like single family or multifamily dwellings or units.
Just to get at Carolyn's kind of concern, I was wondering if you could just drop the sentence, like stop the sentence after the word responsibilities. Occupying a dwelling unit, including the joint use and responsibility of common areas, sharing household activities and responsibilities. I was thinking of dropping it that way, but I also find this kind of a strange definition for family in general. So I don't know. I guess I'll just say it's food for thought, but if you're going to the trouble of updating the definitions, maybe it's worthwhile trying to think through, if they're trying to be so specific that they end up kind of leaving out, potential situations that might make sense to include.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, could you be more generic, not in this one, but the other definition, and not talk about spouse, child, sibling, but say something about someone related by blood, marriage, or adoption?
That may work better. Mhm.
Kind of cover the waterfront.
You don't want to say that either, because what if it's like, like a kind of domestic partner or something like that?
Well, you could put that too.
Yeah, you have to think through it.
Yeah, but I was just saying, trying to get some more generic language in there than child, sibling, parent, grandparent, because then you run into the problem of, you left out the aunts and uncles and cousins and,
Or what about the stepchildren or?
Yeah, exactly. Victor.
So I'm struggling with exactly the same thing and the same issues. What I'll rather than rehashing what's already been said, what I'll point out is in one place you define family in a functional way, and then in the slide that we're looking at here, you replace family with a relationship definition, which is inconsistent. It eventually takes you to the place where, Allison, I think you kind of were going, which is, you basically end up with kind of anyone can live there, but you're kind of there anyway. So you have this inconsistency that's basically you're defining or substituting different paradigms for the word family in the same code, and it's going to lead to some confusion and some probably inconsistencies.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is an area that's going to continue to have state legislative involvement. There was a bill in the legislature this year that would have prohibited these owner occupancy restrictions on ADUs. It didn't pass, but I think it's probably not going to go away. It's something that might come up again in a future legislative session. It's something that's been discussed for a couple years now and seems to have some momentum behind it. So, the state's told us we can't regulate how many people or what makes up a family in a single family dwelling. They haven't yet told us that we cannot require owner occupancy in the ADU, but that could be coming. We had given some flexibility around owner occupancy to include the immediate family. which I think it makes sense to keep that. Like, you know, there's a lot of situations where a parent moves away and their kids would continue to live there or something like that. So, you know, I think for the meantime, until the state forces our hand, it would make sense to figure out how to word this in a way that maintains the flexibility that we've had.
So I'll just echo the earlier comments of, I think you're missing a bunch of stuff. You're missing stepchildren, you're missing domestic partners. Mike, as the lawyer, can probably tell us whether spouse is a legal definition that actually requires a marriage certificate. But there's a bunch of stuff that's missing here in this definition. I understand the challenge of having to define family without saying family, but you're gonna have to widen the umbrella here.
Well, definitely open to suggestions on how to do that when we deliberate at the next meeting.
Sure.
So Allison, can I take a step back? What is the point of this owner occupancy restriction?
Well, the point is that you can't rent out both the primary house and the ADU. The property owner
Why
needs to
not?
live in one of them.
Why not?
I think there's a theory that, you know, having the property owner on site leads to better maintenance of the property, less nuisance issues like noise or parties or trash or what have you.
Yep.
You know, I think it could definitely be argued whether or not that's true, but I think that is the theory that this was based upon.
I'm just struggling with that a little bit because, you know, if it's a rental house, you have the same issues if the owner is, you know, lives in New York or Chicago or.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on renting out a single family home. So
Yeah.
It is a unique thing.
So I just kind of raised the question of, is this really even meaningful? So Carolyn.
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, I think that there is a legal definition of what immediate family member is, I think, and I think you've expressed it pretty well here. A child includes a stepchild, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing you're missing, I guess, is the whole domestic partner thing, or somebody, you know, is the definition of spouse, you know, or, you know, that, but the way you have it right now, to me, it looks good, but there might be a little something missing. That's all I would say.
Tiffin?
Yeah, Mike, I was actually gonna kind of bring up the issue you just brought up, that I don't quite understand this, because like, couldn't you have a situation where you rent it to a family and maybe they have like a mother-in-law or someone using the mother-in-law unit, but it's all rented? So I can't understand why it needs to be owner occupied. And my other question was, is the owner occupancy used elsewhere in the land use code, or is it just for this purpose?
I believe it's just for the ADU code.
So, I mean, this is outside the scope of what we're doing, but I don't know. I kind of run just the idea by the commission and maybe council if we could just take that provision out. I don't, probably need to do some public outreach, but I'm not really understanding. I guess I'm not really understanding what it's trying to achieve.
Victor?
So two things. Number one, I want to caution kind of getting beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here in terms of just following the changes to the state law and broadening the scope of our discussion to kind of start to tweak the code. So cautionary comment one, but two, to follow up with what Mike said and also what Tiffin said, I guess I'll pile on and just ask, how many enforcement actions have we had on owner occupied ADUs in the city?
I I don't think I'm aware of any. We have had some enforcement related to short-term rentals of ADUs, but I don't think there's been owner occupancy. Well, maybe once. I think there might have been one where both units were rented.
So it's almost an academic discussion of how many angels dance on the head of a pin.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm hearing a lot of problems about currently.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I think the owner occupancy requirement kind of comes from historical consideration of ADUs on Mercer Island, where there was, a lot of people didn't want them in the communities. They considered them as, kind of expanding density. And so there was some pushback and some, the owner occupancy was a provision that was meant to kind of tone down the idea of additional density in the neighborhood, which doesn't have anything to do with density, but I think that that it comes from ADUs being a rather hot issue sometimes. And so I agree with Victor that I don't think we should try to bring that into this particular task because it is something that people living in neighborhoods have some feelings about, and it's not meant to be what we're dealing with here, I think.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of mission creep in that discussion, but on the other hand, we're being asked to conform to state law, and if there's a simpler way to get from point A to point B, I'm all for it. Especially, I think Carolyn's probably right in the sense of some of the historical sentiments, but the times they are changing. And, there's different views of the need for a little more density, even in our community here. So I don't know, Allison, if that's something that you can talk to Jeff about, or, running up the flagpole with the council to see if, they would be entertain a simpler solution to this issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think my guess is they would have concerns about it based on some of the conversations we had during the legislative session about the proposal there to remove this owner occupancy requirement.
No, you can only ask.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments? Okay, seeing none, I think we're done. That was good discussion. Thank you, Allison. So I think that's it for that business. Now we have other business, Deputy Director's report.
Yeah, actually, Adam's hanging out here in the background. I'm going to have him give us a little update on some comprehensive plan related stuff first, and then I'll talk about some other things once he's done. Go for it, Adam.
Great, thanks. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that the council approved the scope of work for our comp plan update last Tuesday. And so that kind of gets us rolling on that project. And that means that that you will have we'll have a comp plan kickoff at your next meeting to kind of go over what the project's going to look like moving forward, and then also to get the volunteers for the work groups, the economic development work group and the housing work group. We wanted to give you a heads up today so that you could think about kind of what that, whether or not you would like to volunteer for that, to serve on one of those work groups, and to have an idea of kind of what that would entail. So as a refresher, the work groups will have an economic development work group and a housing work group, and we'll need 2 volunteers from the Planning Commission for each of those work groups. And then those 2 planning commissioners will partner with 2 city council members to work on the first drafts of the economic development element and the housing element. And the first meeting, we're planning to get started with those in May. So you'll select your members in April, and then we'll get the first meeting going in May. And the work groups will meet several times kind of throughout the summer and the fall of this year. And those would be meetings kind of in addition to your responsibilities as a planning commissioner. So membership on the work group will entail some additional time, some additional responsibilities for reading documents and providing comments, that kind of thing. So have that in mind as you're debating whether or not you want to volunteer for one of those. And I think kind of the process that we'll use for selection is we'll solicit volunteers, and then if you have more than 2 volunteers for a work group, we can the commission can vote on who they'd like to send as their representative to the work group. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We just need 2. And then some other notes. Staff just recently, earlier this week, sent out some invites for interviews to different members of the community and business owners to do. Part of our internal process is going to be conducting some interviews with stakeholders to find out kind of what the kind of take a temperature check on what issues are out there around economic development, kind of get a sense of that, the popular conversation on economic development that's out there, as kind of the first step in our engagement process. And then the other thing that's kind of coming up with the comprehensive plan update is we are going to be acting on consultant contracts for several of those kind of components of the comp plan that we're going to get some outside help on. That's all I have for you on the comp plan. I could answer any questions if you have them.
Looks like none.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam.
Mhm.
In terms of other updates, the council last Tuesday also discussed the town center retail code amendment, and the decision they made at that point was to ask staff to bring it back for I think it's the 4th reading that they'll be on at that point, later in the spring. And they are essentially kind of rolling back to the FAR provisions that they were looking at last fall. And I think they were asking for a few additional tweaks and additions. They're calling it the option 5+, that Jeff and Sarah will be working on when they bring that back to the council later in the spring. The council felt that it was not necessary to remand it back to the planning commission again because we have already held a hearing on that FAR proposal, so it did not need an additional public hearing. Let's see. I think that's all I have for updates, unless anyone has questions about anything else that's going on. At our next meeting in April, we'll be holding the public hearings for each of the items we discussed tonight. And like Adam mentioned, we'll be kicking off the planning commission work. Primarily, or one of the important things we'll be doing is selecting the members for the work groups. So definitely spend some time considering whether you're interested in volunteering for those over the next month, and we can talk more about it in April. All right, that's all I've got.
Okay, thanks, Allison. So anyone else have anything for the good of the order? Well, there being no other business before the planning commission, the time is now 8 o'clock and the meeting is adjourned. As a reminder to commissioners, please stay online until the city staff has terminated the broadcast. So have a good night.